Welcome back to the AI Wave. I'm your host, Chris Parisi, and in today's episode, as part of our AI in Education series, we have Dr. Timothy Henry. He is an AI professor at Rhode Island College, so part of the faculty there and part of the leadership team at the Cybersecurity and Emerging Technology Institute. It was a great conversation speaking to a professor of what it's like educating the next generation. How do we prepare the workforce for this AI economy, and what does the jobs look like in this new AI economy? So he talks about that, talks about what it's like to be an educator, how we can utilize AI in higher ed, and much more. It's a great episode, so stay tuned as we continue to ride this AI wave. Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, Chris. Glad to be here.
Oh, I'm glad to have you here. Tim is an excellent person to speak about AI and education, faculty at Rhode Island College in computer science, leadership part of the team at the Cybersecurity and Emerging Technologies Institute, and an AI professor. So no better person to talk about AI and education than you.
Thank you.
So tell our audience a little bit more about yourself, and where are you even from? Are you a Rhode Islander? And eventually, kind of what led you to get into being an educator?
Well, I'm originally from Pennsylvania, from a small town that's a university town. It has a school a little bit bigger than what Rick is, and our town population was doubles whenever the university would be in session. But I talk about that because I first got introduced to computers in a high school physics class my junior year. We were called into a closet, four of us, and there was a teleprinter there that was connected to the new computer at the local university. And we were shown how to program it. We got to write in BASIC. My first program, it was let A equal 6, let B equal 3, let C equal A plus B, print C. And from then, I was kind of super interested in technology and what these could do. It sounded simple, but I like to take things apart. If you remember reel-to-reel tape decks, I got one when I was 12, and about a week later, I took it apart and tried to put it back together and everything. I like building and working with things, so I've always been really interested in technology. My dad was a high school math teacher, and I was always interested in teaching myself. So in high school, I was interested in going to college and eventually becoming a teacher in some form, but our family couldn't afford it. And so one of the ways I looked to pay for my college was to go to a military academy. I ended up going to the Coast Guard Academy in nearby New London, Connecticut. And one of the ways that paid for my education is that the federal government paid for the undergraduate education, and in return, I owed the federal government 5 years in the Coast Guard. And that idea is something that I'll talk about later in some of the opportunities that we're looking at for students. So in my time in the Coast Guard, I dug more into technology. I started, I was as the electronics officer on a Coast Guard boat, and then I was the first chief information officer at a Coast Guard training center down in Yorktown, Virginia.
Oh, cool.
The big project I had there was changing all the office work from the Wang word processors that they were using to the new Coast Guard standard terminal, which was an IBM PC-like terminal that had just come out at the time.
Oh, wow.
We got the first email network set up on the base and everything. It was a very interesting time to be in computer science.
Yeah, very interesting. Everything's about timing, even about AI right now, right?
Right. So after that, my next tour actually was teaching at the Coast Guard Academy. I had wanted to be a teacher. I got to teach in both math and computer science at the Coast Guard Academy. And following that tour, I left the Coast Guard and went into industry and consulting. Now, I wanted to teach at the university level, but to do that, you need a PhD. I only had a master's at the time. And so while I was working on my master's, I did consulting work for some large consulting companies, was able to build a large number of IT systems for the federal government, for the state of Rhode Island, and for some commercial organizations, mostly in healthcare, but I got to a lot of experience in law enforcement and in first responders. and in financial systems. So that's one of the things I like about computer science is you learn about a lot of different industries and all the details of how they work. Well, I finally finished my PhD, and then I went and taught computer science at University of Rhode Island for about 11, 12 years. After that, I went and taught at New England Tech for another 11 years.
Oh, wow.
And now I'm at RIC to help get the Institute for Cybersecurity Emerging Technologies up and running, because I come to it with a background in both cybersecurity and artificial intelligence.
Well, that's exciting. That was quite the journey to get to where you are today. And I want to talk more about what your current role is at RIC. But I do want to make a point from when you were a young kid, right? And this episode is part of the series of AI and education and how education is so important for everything we do. And we're obviously focusing on AI. But just think about if that one scenario where whatever teacher decided in high school to put you all in a little closet in a room and connect you to that university terminal, if they didn't do that, your life may have been a different path.
Correct. It was inspiring to do that. It was different than the physics course we were in, and one of the challenges I had was, how do I keep doing this kind of thing? So when I was looking at universities, it was kind of funny because I remember going to Case Western Reserve, and they were so excited when they talked about their computer lab there, because you could bring your card deck that had your program and all your data in, drop it off in the afternoon, and by the next morning they'd have your program output and have it run for you. So that's kind of what the status was back in that time.
Yeah.
At the Coast Guard Academy, we actually had some remote terminals to Dartmouth time-sharing system. So I actually was able to work with terminals in a small computer lab, much smaller than this room we're in here, where they had the different terminals around. So we've come a very long way. And in thinking about education, AI, and where we are, just in my lifetime, being able to see the transition that we've come through gets me excited about where we can go with AI.
Well, the future of AI in education is something we want to talk about, so stay tuned as we're going to handle that topic. But let's go back to your current role, right? You mentioned you're at Rhode Island College. You're part of the Cybersecurity and Emerging Technology Institute, led by Congressman Langevin. And AI is a big part of what they're doing. Obviously, cybersecurity is as well. So let's talk about what is AI's role in higher education. So not necessarily what Rick is doing, but how can let's pretend you're not an AI professor, just higher education in general. How does AI impact higher ed when it comes to like personalized learning paths, the research capabilities? Tell us a little bit more of how AI in general, no matter what the courses are, impact on higher ed.
It's really hard in some respects to say that because we're in a transition zone right now. What I say today will not be where we are 5 years from now. So one of the things I really like about it is personalized learning. There have been studies done. The same man who did Bloom's categories for education, different levels, has done a study where our current way of teaching is a bell curve. You know, if you think of our bell curve, students, how they do, you've got a small part here that don't do well, you've got a small part here that do really well, and everybody else is in this bell curve in the middle. Well, that's because, we give assignments, we teach, and we have due dates. People have to have things done by a certain date. A better way to do it is what's called mastery learning. In other words, students learn at the rate they learn, and what's important is accomplishing the task, not necessarily in the timeline. And what that does is it slides the bell curve up towards the higher end, where there are still people at the low end, but even the low end people are doing better than they did previously. The best way is to have individualized tutors.
Right.
And in that case, the bell curve becomes really skinny up at the high end. And it's really difficult, knowing that's the best way to do it, but still having classes of 20 to 25 students, you can't get in there and give that individualized tutoring that students need. That's where AI comes in and can be a huge help. Because as an instructor, I can give a guidance as to, okay, this is where we're going. This is what where I want you to be at the end of this period. Let's see if we can all get there. And there'll be students who just blaze through it. There'll be students who will work through it and get there. And then there's other students that will stumble along the way. And they're the ones I think that AI can really help the most meeting the objectives of a course or education. The better students, they can use AI to excel and go even further. I was thinking, I'm involved in some K-12 exercises too. And Khan Amigo, I don't know if you've heard of it, but Khan Academy has an AI built into a lot of its tools now that is really, really good. They've spent a lot of time making it safe, making it not allowing it to give answers, but giving hints. And some of the things I've done with it, some of the demonstrations get me really excited about it because, for example, in the spring, I'm teaching an ethics and technology course. A big part of that course is debates. And I could use, or my students could use an AI to help them practice their debates before they come into class. So that students who are afraid of public speaking, don't really know the topic well, but still have to stand up in front and give a debate, this gives them an opportunity in where they don't have to worry what people think about them to work through a lot of their thoughts. Because as you speak, it helps you better formalize what you're thinking about.
Right.
And so being able to go back and forth with an AI is going to help them become better debaters and think through the topics better before they have to come into class and present. In the K-12 space, which is where I started to go with this, I brought up the debating because Khan Amigo does a really good job debating for high school students, is students at all age levels. Especially the younger students, it's really hard for a second grade teacher to put the time into all the students individually they need. And the sooner we can get tutors and individuals helping, individual AIs helping students, meeting them where they are, the sooner we'll be able to squeeze that bell curve up. Now, if you look at the long-term implications, if students are doing better earlier, they're going to be doing better later. And then whenever they come into higher ed, they're already going to be at a level that we can't imagine right now.
Right.
And so a part of that that's going to be a challenge is that if we really want these AIs to help tutor our students, we need to think about, okay, they need to have like a partner AI for their 12-year career. Because that AI is going to learn more about them, what their strengths and weaknesses are, how they learn best. Does this student learn best visually? Does the student learn best if they have an example in this area? And so down the road, this is what we'll see in education is that we'll have, at an early age, personalized tutors that can go through with us and help us learn better, learn faster. They understand how we learn and can help us achieve what we need to be. So we'll be at a much higher level, humanity-wise.
Right. Yeah, it's something that I've been talking a lot. I always mention the example that my 2-year-old son, Caden, that he's going to be growing up with an AI tutor, right? Like 100%. And we already saw it just as recently, about a week before this episode is being recorded. OpenAI just announced their latest model, Omni 4.0, and they gave a demo of a tutor where this young student was on an iPad. OpenAI was integrated to the iOS, and he's talking and writing on the iPad, talking about, I think, in the hypotenuse angles, right? And drawing it out. And the AI is going back and forth with the young student, educating him, teaching him, nope, it's not that one. Don't you think it's this one? Yep, that's right, correct. And it's personalized to that individual. But what you're saying is taking it to another step that I love that I haven't heard yet, which makes a lot of sense, where most likely this AI tutor, and we'll go back to Caden as an example, let's say they start him, let's say next year at 3 years old, that AI tutor, that model can be essentially fine-tuned to him individually for the next 15 years of his life until he's 18.
Yes, and think about that in healthcare. in other areas of our life. If we can use the same technology to help us be healthier people, to help us be more knowledgeable people, that's a future that I'm looking forward to being there, and I hope I'm here for it.
Well, having information is one thing, but actually following through it is a whole different thing.
And I think it's important to remember, again, I mentioned we were in a transition stage. We're just learning these tools. The tools are never going to be worse than they are right now. They're only going to be getting better. And so we need to think about, what can we do with this? Where's the goalposts that we want to head for with this?
So when it comes to AI's role in higher education, a big thing that we talked about is the personalized learning, right? A educator, whether you're K through 12 or higher ed, you can only do so much for the many students you have. And you don't, as we discussed on one of our previous episodes, there's like 5 roles that teachers and educators have, more than just educating. So I think AI is going to be a huge impact and assist to them as well as the students. Is there anything else that you feel that AI can impact higher education, whether it's on administrative level, whether it's from like research, because obviously universities have a lot of research departments. Anything else that you can think of?
Well, I think from an administrative perspective, it can help, just like with any business, getting the right business intelligence and making the best decisions, but also with identifying students who maybe are in jeopardy sooner. So even before we get to the personalized learning, if the AI is given access to current student performance in courses across the board. Like as an instructor, I know how well they're doing in my course, but I don't know what they're doing in the 2 or 3 or 4 other courses they're taking. I don't always know how well they did in previous courses. So I only have that one little snapshot. What AI can do for us is give us a better holistic view of this student so we can better do our job as an instructor.
Right. It's like for marketing, if AI can help us with the complete analysis of that business so that we can better market for them, you could do the same thing where they give you, based on the data that this student has had over the years, here's an analysis of this student, here's where his or her strengths and weaknesses are, and so that's a really great point too. That's interesting.
Right. As a faculty person, my goal is to help the students be better at the end of the course, whether that is academically or in their life, because a lot of students, especially here in Rhode Island, are working jobs outside of here, and so they're trying to balance everything. And if the personalized tutor can help relieve me of some of the time I need to spend academically with them, if the AI can give me holistic information about the student, that helps me, one, have more time to focus on the individual person and understand where they are and help them to get to where they want to go.
So a lot of questions are around what does this AI economy look like? And before that, they'll ask, well, what does an AI course look like, right? So for those that are wondering, especially you younger folks, like, hey, I want to get into AI. Like, it's very broad, and even though AI has been around for many decades, right? As you know, as you've been in. So kind of explain to our audience, what is a class in AI like at Rick?
Very good question. One of the major factors of being an instructor is we're trying to prepare students for a job after they graduate college, because that's why people go to college, is they want to get a halfway decent job afterwards.
Right.
Well, the real question is, what is an AI job? What are we really preparing them for? And the answer to that is nobody knows. I'm part of a number of different standards committees for cyber and AI, for AI scholarship for service at the national level. We have the AI task force here in Rhode Island. Who is this AI worker that we're preparing for? There are no federal standards right now. The Department of Defense Cybersecurity Workforce Standards has 4 really general topics, like AI innovator that implements it, AI advocate, believe it or not, that looks at the strategic values. They have an AI and ML person who is who you would normally think of as the AI that does the research, the data science, and all of that stuff. And a couple other roles that are really generally defined but don't fit where we are today. So developing the program at Rhode Island College, what we decided to do was look at different ways people are going to be using AI in the workplace. So you have people who are nurses, social workers, management, business management students. How are they going to be using AI in the workplace? And so we have a course or two that are designed around, okay, here's your business in healthcare, in financial sector, and manufacturing. How can you integrate current AI tools into your business workflow? Mm-hmm. How can they help you out? We also looked at students who are going to need to use AI tools to help make their business more productive. All right, so this is someone who's going to be gathering the data for an AI model. What do they need to know about gathering the data, selecting the data, the model that they're going to use, and how do they integrate that into a continuous effort in the workplace, which would, that's generally our AI program is for most of the people. And that ways looks a lot at data science courses. Mm-hmm. So we've partnered with the math department for some of our data science courses to make sure students come in with an understanding of, what's fair and biased data. How do we need to prepare the data so that the model produces what we need? And then the last piece are the students who are going to be doing the research, and that gets a lot more in-depth into math. They'll be really pushing the envelope in their organization. So those are kind of the three areas. We have courses in each of those areas. Most of the second two groups that I talked about will be taking a basic AI course that looks at just some of the traditional AI tools that we've been using, starting with pathfinding in games. When your NPC has to go hunt you down, how does it get from where it is to where you are? That's a AI model that works there. We'll look at decision trees, which you've probably, yourself, well, if I do this, then I can do this. Like 20 questions trying to figure out a game, an animal. And then some other traditional. Then we'd get into neural networks and just introduce them to what current AI technologies are without getting into too much depth. Following that is a machine learning course that really digs deeply into how do you prepare the data, how do you select the AI model that you're going to use, and how do you evaluate how the model's done. Is it not biased? Is it going to give you the answers, the type of answers you want for your business? And then after that, what we've done is basically with those two courses and some of the math background and computer science that you need for those, you can have a minor in AI. Mm-hmm. For the major in AI, after that, you dig deeply into different areas. For example, natural language processing. How does ChatGPT understand what you want to say, and how does it come back with an answer? In fact, how does Siri know what you're talking about?
Right.
How does it translate what you say into something and go do some task? That's all natural language processing, the little chatbots that you have on web pages and
right.
stuff. Then there's another course in computer vision, which is really interesting. It's not just generating all these images that you see, but whenever you have an image, how does Facebook automatically know to tag you in images? How does it identify your face?
Like the facial recognition?
Right. That's a big piece of it. And even going as far as object recognition. Mm-hmm. If you've ever used current versions of Photoshop, it automatically pulls out objects for you.
Right.
I'm so glad, because I don't have the time to learn all the details of Photoshop. Makes my life easier. And that's one of the things with AI. It's going to make our life easier and give us power to do things we couldn't do before. So that's the computer vision course. Not just generating the images like you see in DALL-E and Midjourney and some of the others, but being able to understand how it can recognize what's in images too. Then there's a what's called reinforcement learning and autonomous systems class. This course looks at self-driving cars and the way those AIs are being trained. So, for example, if you remember the Google DeepMind had a Go playing game.
Yep.
It was trained using reinforcement learning. The better chess playing programs are trained using reinforcement learning. And what that is, it's kind of a goal reward punishment system. So if you're trying to teach a car to drive down the road, you give it extra points if it stays in the middle of the lane. If it starts to get too close to the lane, you don't give it as many points. If it goes over the lane marker, you take away points. And so it just keeps trying and trying and trying and trying and trying until it figures out how to maximize the points that it gets. Now, one of the cool things about that is that can all be run in simulation in a computer. So it can happen. You don't have to drive your car down to do it. But when you translate what the computer simulation into the real world, there are some challenges along with that. And that's some of what the self-driving cars are running into now. I mean, that's been promised for years, but it's a really, really difficult problem to solve, because here you have this AI that has to interact with a very changeable
It's
world.
not easy. I have an AI-driven car, to no surprise probably, but it's great. It works really well, but it's difficult. There's people that can be running out into the street that it has to stop, but it has to know that that's actually a car that's parked, not driving, and it's so many variables that it's tough to process. But it does a pretty good job, but it must have taken astronomical amount of simulations, hours, and programming to get to this point.
Yes, it does. And we're still not where we need to be with it.
No.
And one of the challenges with that is the whole black box of the AI. Nobody really 100% understands how it works. It's based on some of the same.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when you look at some of these deep learning neural networks, the math behind it and the amount of data is so complex, you can't mathematically prove how it got the answer. Can say, well, it's right 98% of the time. Is that good enough to drive your car?
Right.
There's actually the company Anthropic, who has the Claude AI. I don't know if you've used that before. They actually just recently published a paper about looking into that black box. How can we do it? And surprisingly, it's very similar to looking at how the brain works.
Right.
Whenever you're thinking about something, let's say moving your arm, there's certain regions of your brain that fire. Right. Similar with the AIs, there are regions of these neurons in the AI that fire when it's thinking about certain words or certain outputs. And so they're starting to do some mappings with that. It's still in the very early stage. It was really interesting that, if they really crank up like the hate speech ones, it comes up and it outputs almost always hate speech, or else it's very criticizing as it goes. But it gave them a way to control what the AI is outputting. And so there's pros and cons with that.
I'm sure quantum computing will eventually help to figure out those unknowns with the black box.
It may.
Because it could do mathematical computations outside the traditional form of physics.
Right. What I think quantum physics is going to do for us is it's going to supercharge the AI, because the same probabilistic way that quantum physics or quantum mechanics and quantum computers work is how AIs work. Mm-hmm. They work on probabilities. And so as those two kind of merge together,
that's the future.
That's the positronic brain from Star Trek.
So that was really interesting, kind of understanding what are the courses, in this AI, if you want to major in artificial intelligence. And I'm sure if anyone's listening that's really interesting, they can go to Rhode Island College, and there's other universities here in Rhode Island that are providing these courses and these majors. That was really exciting, and we talked about, the focus of higher ed is to prepare the workforce, right? And the economy that's going to be created is going to be very different than the economy that exists today. And in some ways, it's unknown. Similar to when in the mid-90s when the internet was becoming mainstream, people didn't know, they actually were fearful that jobs might have been lost. People didn't know what jobs were going to be created. They didn't know that in 10 years, social media was going to be developed. And then there's all of these social media jobs, marketing, influencers, and not just even the programmers and builders of and advertising jobs that came out of it. So I'm sure, like you said, it's tough to prepare for something that is uncertain. But where do you see the jobs, just to give an example, that are in AI in this new AI-driven economy?
Well, I'm getting the feeling that it will most likely be people, as I mentioned, that are going to implement AI in a business. In other words, in some places it'll be data scientists who expand their role. Other places it'll be new roles for them. People who understand the importance of good data going into these models, because if you don't put really good, unbiased, evenly distributed data into these things, you're not going to get out good answers to your questions.
Right.
And it's going to make you're going to end up making poor business decisions.
Right.
So people who really understand that and are able to select the right tool or model to use in the different scenarios, or where the work, I think that's the next AI workforce, is people who can go in and speak intelligently about that, who can look at a business and say, okay, these are things that are good for AI, to use AI on. These things over here, they're not, AI won't help you where it's at right now, maybe in the future.
Right.
And so, because nobody really knows in a lot of business, unless you've really worked with AI, you don't really know how it can help you, because AI is so much more than ChatGPT.
Right.
And more than just being able to provide you business intelligence and decisions.
Right.
There are so many more ways that, if you think creatively, it can be integrated into your business workflow.
So what does this future look like? What does the future of AI in higher education look like? How do you see things changing in your field? Or how do you think things will be changing in general?
Well, I'll start with education.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about that already. The way I'm looking at it is it's another paradigm shift for educators. If you look at where we were 25, 30 years ago, you still had the lecture in front of the classroom, very little technology in a typical non-technology course.
When you started.
Right. And then as you go, you start to see, okay, we've got websites that we can put information on for our students. And then, we also had to start dealing with, students are bringing their laptops into class. Do we allow that? Do we not allow it? You have to change how you teach.
Yeah.
Now they're bringing mobile devices into the classroom. Does that impact how you teach? We've got to shift. A number of faculty were already moving courses online, and then COVID came and forced faculty to put courses online. That shifted the paradigm of how we teach. Now we're kind of recovering from that, figuring out what needs to go back in person, what should stay online, and all of that. But as we're doing that, we have another paradigm shift, this AI. Yeah. So the last 30 years in education has really been tumultuous, is probably a good way to say it, as far as the technology and the interactions with students. Because in each of those cases, how you interact with the students, what you allow the students to do in the classroom, it all changes. And so you've just got to look at what are your goals in this course in your program, and how can you best utilize the different tools that are available to you in each of the cases. So what do I see? I'll tell you, for me, I'm spending all summer figuring out how I can use AI as much as possible in all my courses, for a couple different reasons. One, I wanted to see what we can do with it. Second, I have a responsibility as being the AI expert, supposedly, to know what's going on. And so the best way to do that is for me to dig in myself and see how can I use this in my courses.
But what do you mean by give me an example of how that application looks like, what that application looks like?
Okay, in my programming course, the data structures course, right now 56% of programmers are using GitHub Copilot, which essentially writes a first draft of your code for you, like ChatGPT does a first draft of an essay for you. So students are going to be using that when they graduate. I need to teach the students how to get comfortable with that right now. So, they have it free for educators and students. So I'm going to start looking at, I've used it some myself, but how can I integrate this into the classroom and not lose the critical thinking that students have?
Great.
Because at a number of conferences I went to, I talked to both employers and companies that are AI manufacturing companies. Well, AI programming. I don't know if you can say they're manufacturing, but so, and what they want are people who are critical thinkers, easily adaptable to new situations, because as you move from one business problem to another, you've got to adapt. And then people who work well in teams. None of those were technology things. Yeah. So as I'm teaching my courses, I want them to learn to be critical thinkers while they're using the tools. And so I've got to see, okay, if they're going to have GitHub Copilot write their code, how can I still ensure they understand the concepts and they can think critically about what they're doing? And so that's one of the areas where I'm doing it this summer. I already mentioned about using it as a debating tool for my ethics course. I'm figuring I need to figure out how I'm going to lean into it with the essays they need, the critical thinking papers they write in the course too. And then there's, I'm just thinking through my course, I have a digital forensics course. So there's a lot of ways that AI can be used to analyze log files and other computer information to give you direction as to, okay, you should look in this area, you should look in that area to investigate something.
That makes a lot of sense. You're getting them ready for the real world, right? It's that age-old comparison of when calculators came out. Right, we're like, oh, well, we can't have students use calculators. They're not going to learn how to do mathematics. And we've obviously evolved beyond that. And you have to utilize the tools that you're going to be utilizing outside after education in the workforce.
And that's a good point for higher ed is, we need to prepare them for the workforce afterwards. But we've also got to think K to 12, they're already using these tools. And so when they come into higher ed, they've already been using ChatGPT for reference or writing essays, maybe asking questions about their math homework. So we've got to understand that about our students as we prepare our new courses coming up.
So before we wrap this up, let's get a little crazy and start thinking out into the future. So every answer you gave me has been very pragmatic. And
actually, that's one of the things. I tend to be an implementer. More so
than a visionary.
Visionary.
All right, that's my job is to be the visionary on the AI task force. So Dr. Henry's also on the AI task force, which is Rhode Island's through the AI executive order that the governor signed, created the AI task force. And our job's going to be how can we maximize the opportunities here while mitigating any negative impacts for Rhode Islanders. But my question was going to be, what is some crazy idea or vision that you have when it comes to AI that it may not be reality, may not happen, right? So it's not necessarily likely, but what is something that you've thought of, you'd be like, you know what, shit, it may turn into this?
I'm going to preface this with you've got to take into privacy concerns of the data and fairness and bias as you're doing all this. But as I mentioned before, with personal AI tutors, being able to get us to a higher point when we graduate high school, or maybe not even needing to graduate high school, you could finish maybe 16 years of what we do now in 12 years. Think about how much potential the human race has with that. Couple that, again, privacy concerns considered, with a healthcare agent that is your partner there. Now, it's not just that you've been tutoring or being tutored by this as you grow, or that it's your, doctor companion. All right, but as it's learned about you, you've learned about it, and it really is a partnership between you and this tool.
It's a symbiotic relationship.
Yes, I want to say it's sort of like most people in Google now.
Right.
Okay, you don't know everything, so you rely on search engines to give you that information. Well, we're never going to know everything. We can't remember everything. But having an AI agent that knows you for your 18 years, 20 years, first 20 years of your life, think about how well it can complement you and what you want to do.
And I'll take that a next step further. And where I see things is you have your biotic system within you with all your cells. You're going to have an abiotic system of all this nanotechnology with these nanocells that essentially is giving the data to this AI agent, healthcare agent, that knows everything about you at the molecular level so that it could be proactive and essentially can then also heal you within through these AI agents, through these nanocells as well, which is similar to what you're talking about. So that's where I think things are heading, where there's this integration of technology and human. And I know that's like the transhumanism movement, and I'm not saying I'm forward or against it as much as I do think that's where we are heading, because we're going to need that data in order to do some of the things that you're talking about.
Right. Well, now we are cyborgs with our phones.
Right.
You know, pretty much anybody in a developed country is tied to their phone. Eventually, that's not going to be a separate device.
Correct.
Like you mentioned. And I just read an article about Neuralink, and the first person they actually implanted the device into, wildly successful. Now, some of the threads that connect to the brain have come out, but all that's required the person to do is to retrain the AI. And this is something we'll see a lot, too, as we work with AI. I'm not sure if you remember some of the first handwriting recognition programs that came out. They'd have you write a bunch of phrases so it could learn what your handwriting looked like. But what ends up happening is it learns, but it's still wasn't very good. And so you had to learn how to write in order to get it to recognize. In other words, if I'm left-handed, so I draw my letters differently. If I wanted the AI to recognize my handwriting, I had to write the letters closer to how a right-handed person does it. And it did much better.
Oh, wow.
And so
some bias is built in for right-handedness.
Don't get me started. But that's the same thing that's going to happen with these AIs as we go forward. Again, it's going to be a relationship where the AI is going to learn about us, we're going to learn about the AI, and if we're open to that, we can go so much further.
Well, that's exciting. I'm excited for the future of where this is heading. Everything that you just shared with us is really insightful. I know if I was 10, 15 years, 20 years younger, 30, 25 years younger, geez, I'm older than I thought, and I was going to go into college, I would want to have this be in this field for sure. So with the closing thought, do you have any advice for the next young generation as they're in high school, they're trying to figure out not only their self and their lives, but where they want to head to? Any advice for them or any advice for educators in general?
Well, I think for high school students, definitely go after your dream. There's a lot of really great ways to achieve that, and there will be more help for you in the upcoming years. As far as educators, I'm going to say embrace the technology. It's not going to go away, and students will become more and more familiar with it and adept with it as the years go by. So it becomes our responsibility to understand that and think, how can we still accomplish what we need to do in this new changing world?
Well said. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us on the AI Wave podcast. And I look forward to continuing to work with you as we, together, hopefully with many of you, look to make Rhode Island the leading state in this AI-driven economy. Thank you.
Thank you.